Happy September, everybody. Made it through a summer, or almost made it through a summer. And I was inspired to do this little video today, which hopefully you find useful. We're going to do a little ditty on texts that have concepts that have multiple historical sources behind them that have different values. And the age-old question, which one is correct? Now, I've done this video in a different version before. And that version of the video was with Kabbalah and the trees of life, and how I learned that there were multiple trees of life. And I was on that which one is correct spiel. And I've talked about dogma before on this channel, and I'll talk about dogma again. There is no one correct way, only one correct way. And that's something that a lot of people have a big problem with, because they want that one way. There's only one truth, right? The one truth, and everything else is false. This is not how the world is created. And especially when you get into mysticism and esotericism, that's just not the way it works. And of course, if we're coming from the empirical standpoint, where materialism and spirituality got separated, then that defies empirical evidence, right? And that's one way to discount any type of mysticism, is just to say it's all bullshit because you have multiple versions of the truth which can't be correct. So I challenge you, from a philosophical standpoint, to think of things that may have multiple truths about them. And from a Hermetic standpoint, remember that all truths are simply half-truths. And there's always another perspective that you can look at. Now, what inspired this video today, and as I've told you, I don't really sit around plotting different videos or spamming the channel with different ideas, because I just don't think that there's any authenticity behind saying the same thing over and over again, or grifting, right? I just don't. And sometimes you just have to let things percolate a little bit. So once I get an idea to do a video, I do it, which is why I only do 1 or 2 a month usually on average. Sometimes it'll be more, but it's usually only 1 or 2. As I was going through my studies over the weekend, I was studying a bit of Kabbalistic text, and I came upon the association of the astrological 7 classical planets to the 7 double letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And as I want to do, once this text gave the list of the 7 double letters and their planetary association, I went and checked my texts, my notes, and lo and behold, they were different. Now, I did that video before on the tree of life having different trees and which one is correct. I've also done a thing on gematria having multiple versions, and we're going to talk about that in this video, actually. But here we have a Kabbalistic association with the 7 double Hebrew letters with their planets being different than what I was taught. So I just kind of laughed. And then I dug into it to go, where did this come from? And I made notes, and now I know that there's multiples of that. And so I wanted to share that with you guys. Because one thing that we want to get out of the habit of doing as students is ever taking what you read as the full gospel, of ever hearing what someone's lecturing on as the full gospel. That should not be the case. You will hear contradictions, or you should hear contradictions if you're seeking multiple perspectives. And because of that, you will be challenged. So my beginnings, I was trained esoterically through the Golden Dawn when I was young. My first esoteric teachings were actually, I was initiated into a Druid circle in a grove when I was in high school, many, many years ago. And I learned a lot of basic earth studies there. And then picking up Golden Dawn after, while I was in the Army. I found a book by happenstance in a bookstore downrange in Korea, and that altered my life. But for many years, so a lot of my Kabbalah and a lot of the things that I learned for the past 25 years came from the Golden Dawn. And so I took it in my head that that's just how things were. That was that was your truth. That was your source of truth. And then as I started getting into other traditions, I started seeing multiple takes on the same things that I had thought were the one truth. No, and in my life, no one's ever explained this to me. And so I've asked a lot of questions, and when I ask these questions, most of the time, no one can give me a good answer, which is why I'm doing this video. I think some people did know the answer, they won't tell you the answer. They want you to find it out on your own. And I believe very strongly in that. You have to find a lot of the answers out on your own, but I also believe that there's a value in an instructional lesson that you can take to heart to keep in mind. And that's just my own personal opinion. So when we talk about Hebrew, the Hebrew alphabet is keystone to esoterics in the West. The legend and the myth is that the Hebrew alphabet is what God used to create the cosmos, that the Hebrew alphabet is magical, and that there's deep mystical meaning behind the Hebrew alphabet. And the Hebrew alphabet is what we consider a hieroglyphical alphabet, meaning that the actual there are different meanings of the letters. So there's the letter as it appears before us. That's the visual hieroglyphical meaning, which has a representation. So it's more than just looking at like a letter, like Aleph, the very first letter, and knowing that it's Aleph. That it's the hieroglyph that represents Aleph holds meaning. Then there is the way it's spoken. It's vibratorial. So it's on the tongue. It's the second form of the letter. The vibration it makes when you speak has power. And the last is a hidden meaning. The back of the tongue is what they say. And that is its geometrical value, or the number. And we can use numbers to communicate, because mathematics is the language of the divine. And it is my belief that mathematics is the language that can unify all of humanity, because it's universal. Whether you believe in that myth or legend or not is up to you. I believe we can give power to myths and legends and make them real. The history of the Abrahamic faiths, as it were, stems from the fact that after the Temple of Solomon was built, and then in 586 BC it was burned to the ground by Nebuchadnezzar, and the Jews were taken into captivity. And they stayed in captivity, and then 48 years later, King Cyrus issued an edict that let them go back to their homeland to rebuild the second Temple of Solomon. And ultimately it would take 70 years between the destruction of the first and the finishing of the second temple. Okay? And then, of course, the Romans would destroy it a few hundred years later, and that was it. And then the Templars would occupy those ruins during the Crusades and dig out artifacts. The key of that is the Hebrews, the Jews, the tribes of Israel. There were 12 tribes of Israel, but the 10 tribes that were held in captivity learned the Mesopotamian religions. They learned the Babylonian faith. And from that, they crafted their own mythology, and that is where the Old Testament was born, which is why if you study Babylonian religious history and Sumerian religious history and the Akkadians and the Phoenicians and all those other people, you'll find similarities. Like you'll find various versions of Noah's Ark that predate the Bible. And that is because the Hebrews took those legends and made them their own and made the Hebrew Bible. So, again, whether you choose to believe the Hebrew language is the magical language of God is up to you. It is a tradition steeped in the Golden Dawn and other mystery traditions, and so we just say we believe that. But knowing its history is important. Knowing where it came from is important. That takes me to the second point. I learned a lot of things throughout my life that I took as dogma, even though I'm against dogma, meaning this is the way it is. And so when I would get a contradiction, it would throw me off. When you're studying this stuff, when you want to study esotericism, actually when you want to do anything, even it doesn't have to be esotericism, you really have to learn to develop those logic centers. Now, most people I know consider themselves deep thinking, rational minded people, to include myself. Most people I know are the farthest thing from. And maybe that is myself as well, right? And I know that I've let emotions run some of my thoughts. The point of that is this. We as humans have this tendency. We have one of our greatest superpowers. Probably the superpower that has allowed us to dominate this planet is not our brain. Because there are animals with bigger brains than we have. It's not our brain. It is our amazing ability to cooperate and build things together. When things are in balance, there's nothing that we can't do. The thing is that there are people who actively seek to keep things out of balance. And that is the problem. And when to be a rational thinker is to try to find that middle ground, that middle pillar, and not stray to an extreme, which in today's world almost seems impossible because social media is geared to piss you off and keep you emotional, which keeps you on those extremes and not in the middle. You have to dig into where is the source of my information getting their information from? I call that going up the stream. I want to go up the stream. I don't want to read a modern book today and just take it for granted that this person knows what they're talking about. I want to know where they got it from. And the authors and the people, the teachers that I respect deeply are the ones that cite their references. And the ones that I promote are the ones that cite their references. So that I can, number one, I can fact check them. And number two, I can know where they got their information from so I can study from their source too. Because what they're doing is they're taking something they've read or whatever, or watched or learned, and they're synthesizing it in their own words. And there is power to that, and there's a strong use to that. By being able to take information and synthesizing that in a way that other people can hear, that's very useful. But what goes out of bounds for me is when those people who are synthesizing don't cite their references and treat it as if they came up with this, which is everywhere, especially like on YouTube. Influencers do it all the time. And I want you to keep me on track. Like if I'm presenting something, I'm going to try to tell you why I got it, where I got it from. It's not just from me. And if it is just for me, I'm going to say, it's from me. Trust me, bro. That's what I call, I just trust me, right? Or I came up with this. But if there are so many influencers or channels that I don't follow because when I watch them, they may have good information, but they don't cite their references, and they're treating it like they are super guru who just came up with this to get followers. And I think that that's dirty. It denies you the ability to fact check them, number one. Number two, it denies you the ability to study where they got that from so that you can learn more. In effect, it's a gatekeeping mechanism that is used so that you have to go to them for information. And that's grifting to me. So, always, I like to dig into the source. Where did that person get this information from? What books, whatever. And I will go up and up and up the chain until I find their source. And once you get deep in up that chain, guys, you're not reading modern English anymore. A lot of times you're going to be reading Latin, you're going to be reading Greek texts, you're going to be reading Hebrew texts. And there is an amazing, profound, I cannot stress this enough, profound difference in reading a source text in its home language versus someone else's modern English translation. I'm going to drop a big one on you that we're writing a paper on now, or we're working on now. Excuse me, some of the brothers in my lodge. It's a religious text. It's probably going to piss some people off, but that's fine. So one of our brothers speaks Greek. He is Greek. And a lot of the New Testament was written in Greek. So if you can find those source texts, you're going to discover a lot of things. It's going to change how you think about theology, because you're going to see exactly how things got altered after the Council of Nicaea. One of the things that Christ said, Christ says a lot of things in the Gospels. That's the point of the Gospels. He is asked by the Jews. The Jews wanted to kill him the whole time. They're just like stalking him everywhere and wanting to kill him. By what authority do you have, by what authority are you using to say these things, to heal these people, to command, or whatever they were seeing Jesus doing? And what everyone recognizes from theology today is him saying, basically, I'm paraphrasing, I am the Son of God. I am the Son of God. That's my authority. Which casts that supernatural divinity on Christ. That's what we're taught. The Greek text is a little bit different, and it's so small. It's removing one word, one tiny word. It's not even it's a little conjunction word, and replacing it with another one. He says in Greek, by the same authority that John the Baptist used, I am a Son of God. They swapped the A for the, and that makes a huge difference in the context of that writing in the gospel. I said that'll piss a lot of people off, but that's what the original Greek says. Profound power in learning, taking the time to learn Greek, Latin, Hebrew, to be able to read those texts, or aligning yourself with an order that has those people and being able. I still think you should learn to some degree. If you do any esotericism, you're going to pick up at least being able to recognize the alphabets and their geometrical values. Okay. So get the source text. Find out where things are coming from. Don't just trust what you hear as the gospel. Otherwise, you're just following the crowd. You're just saying, well, I trust them. I like them, so I trust them. And you're being led around by the nose, and you're not a rational thinker at that point. You're an emotional thinker that's following your emotion. The emotion being, I trust him or I trust her because I like her. So therefore, she's speaking the truth. And she may be speaking the truth. But if she's not giving you the opportunity to fact check her, she's doing you a disservice. Now, I'm going to talk about two different things for your own edification, for your own knowledge. Gematria in Hebrew. So letters also used to represent numbers. And numbers are very powerful, as I said before. Numbers are the mathematical root of the divine. Geometry is God's language in physical manifestation for you to see. Music is God's language represented in time and vibration. Astronomy represents God's language represented in both physical representation and time. Which is why, my friends, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy are a part of what is known as the quadrivium. to which you should all make yourself familiar with. Getting better at geometry gets you closer to God. Where does all that stem from? Not trust me, bro. That goes all the way back to the Pythagorean schools and the Neoplatonics and all the way on up. Now, gematria is the ability to take, gematria is literal Kabbalah. It's taking the letters and turning them into numbers. And so in the Golden Dawn, we were taught a version of that. And so basically each letter has a value, 1 through 10, and then after 10 it goes from 20 on up to 400. Hebrew has the concept of 5 finals, meaning that if a letter is at the end of a word, one of these 5 letters is at the end of the word, it'll be represented differently. The hieroglyph will be different. And in that system, its gematria will also be different. And so that lets them go to the number 900. And the reason why the Golden Dawn chose that is because that also lines up with the Greek alphabet. So that's how they marry those up, so that the alphabets can work together in translating. Now, in my experience, it is very difficult, if not impossible, for many texts to try to get a one-to-one correlation between the geometrical values between one and the other. So if I have the word serpent in Hebrew, and it'll have a geometrical value, its Greek geometrical value is probably going to be different. Now you can fact check me. I don't know if that's true. I've gone and tried to. I used to be of the opinion that they would share the same numerical value, and they don't. In a lot of cases, anyway, they don't. So, but that's why they chose that. Now, as I was reading other texts or other esoteric texts on Kabbalah, they'd be talking about gematria, and they'd be like, well, the value for this word is this number, and I'd be like, cool, and I'd go, I want to practice, so I'd go break out my knowledge on Hebrew gematria, and I'd try to do it, and the number would always be different. I'm like, why am I wrong? And I'd look at the letters, and I'd break it down, and my number was oftentimes very different, more particularly if it had a final form. And it used to drive me nuts. I'm like, why is this wrong? Why am I getting it wrong? And it turns out that led me down the rabbit hole of finding out that there are many different ways of gematria. And we're going to go look at 10 of them now, shall we? There are 10 different ways we can break down gematria. And so, since gematria is used often as it can be used as a cipher in case to hide, to embed data, you have to know what gematria, what form that the author used. You can't just take it for granted that it was Golden Dawn, which in my experience is not actually very commonly used at all, or if it was the default, or if it was one of the other obscure ones. So keep that in mind. But let's look at what we got. All right. So we have Mispar. I'm going to mispronounce these guys, and I apologize, but Mispar, Hekreki. This is the default values, and this is typically what you're going to find in texts. It's the same as the Golden Dawn, except that that the final letters have the same value as their normal counterparts. And Mispar Gadol is what Golden Dawn teaches. And in that case, they've extended the 5 final letters to have their own values, which go up to 900, which lines up with the Greeks. Then we have Mispar Katan. This is where they take each letter and they break it down to a value between 1 and 9, and then it cycles back. So this follows the rule of reduction, which is something we do in Kabbalah. We take a big number and we break and we condense it all the way down to its single digit so that we can find what's called its essence, which Pythagoras taught. Then we have Mispar Siduri. The letters are just given a value based on where they lie in the alphabet. So if they're in the 15th position, it will have the number 15. We have Mispar Kolel. It's like the default system, except the total value of the word, when they add the word up, they'll add an additional +1 next to it to symbolize the divine or the monad permeating from it. You have Mispar Meshulash, which is the triangular values. Each letter equals the triangular number of its standard. 6 will be 1 plus 2 plus 3, and 400 is the sum of 1 to 400, which is 80,200. I've never seen this one used, so I can't really get deeper into that, but that's one. We have Mispar Parati, individual values, is like the default, except each unit is written out in its full word. Each unit, so they're basically spelling out, I'm assuming they're spelling out the letters, but then that's Mispar Shami, which is its name as well. Value of the spell.name, the letter. I have not seen these worked before, so I can't get into more depth. This is just kind of what I've researched and pulled up. Mispar Misparti, each letter equals the gematria of its name in Mispar Hekriki, the default. And Mispar Hakadamni, the primordial, uses ancient Proto-Hebrew and assigns different orders. And again, I've never used those before. So I've seen the Golden Dawn version, and usually the standard version is what I've run into. But that was 10. There's 10 versions that I've pulled up that can all be used. So just because you learn one version doesn't mean that it's the only version, and so you need to know what the author was doing. And that takes us to what sparked this video in the first place. So in the Hebrew alphabet, there are 3 mother letters, and those mother letters represent the primordial elements. So you have at the very top Aleph, which represents primordial air, and it's Mercury. So in alchemy, it's Mercury, it's the spirit. And that spirit is both male and female, and everything emanates from it. Then you have the masculine, which is Shin. Shin represents fire. And when you look at it, it actually looks like little flames of fire. It also, its word means, it means tooth in Hebrew. And it is the masculine projecting essence, represents sulfur in alchemy, which is the soul of the thing. And then you have Mem, which is water, which is the feminine receptacle, receiver. And so she receives the projection. So in Kabbalah, the air blasts out its potential, which is received by the masculine, which pushes it out, and it hits the receptive feminine. Those both have to be equal. Those are both equal. They have to be. And this is part of where our world is falling apart. Like, we're trying to make one gender better than the other, and they're equal. If they're not equal, your world's out of balance. And if your world's out of balance, it turns into a shit show, kind of like how Earth is most of the time. And then then the feminine blasts that down into the 7 realms, which is the rest of the Kabbalah. Now, that's the 3 mother letters. We also have 7 double letters, which are letters that have 2 representations. They have 2 ways of being sounded. And we have 12s. I've seen them called, I like to call them elemental letters, but they're just the 12 letters. And those 12 letters can be mapped to the zodiac. And the 7 doubles map to the 7 classical planets. So they have the qualities of those planets. We're going to look at that. So Golden Dawn teaches a standard way, and I found a different way. And that's what sparked this video. So let's check that one out, see what this looks like. All right, so there we have the 7 double letters in Hebrew, their names. And we see we have 2 systems here. We have the Gra Gaon, and we have the Sadia Gaon. It looks like I've added an extra A in that slide. So Gra Gaon is Gaon. So I actually pronounced it in the description correctly, or spelled in the description correctly. So Golden Dawn teaches Gra Gaon, and I'm probably, again, mispronouncing that, and my deepest apologies. This is the only one I've ever seen up to this point. It's what Golden Dawn uses. So the Gra, who that was Elijah ben Shlomo Zalman, who lived from 1720 to 1797. He was an impactful Jewish scholar of the 18th century, and much of the modern-day Kabbalah is attributed to him, to what he worked on in the Zohar and the Sefer Yetzirah. And so the Golden Dawn chose to use his work. Now the Gra also has his own tree of life, which is actually not the standard tree of life. And I talked a little bit about that in the video referencing the tree of life, the Gra tree. I actually like the Gra tree quite a bit, but they actually use what's standard in Hermeticism. What Golden Dawn uses is a tree that was born out of a guy named Kirchner, who wrote a book called the Egypticus in the 1600s. And basically, the Egypticus was the 1600s version of the Golden Dawn. He was trying to synthesize esotericism into one book, and he got a lot wrong. So that's why I don't have it, and I don't really reference it, because he got a lot wrong. But knowing that it exists is useful, and actually the tree of life that we use today from the Golden Dawn is based on Kirchner's version, which stems from the Pythagoreans, actually, from the point to the line, from the line to the superficie, and from the superficie to the solid. If you imagine all of those things drawn out in front of you, you create the tree of life. And that comes from Pythagorean teachings. Now, so here this chart shows you the correspondences to everything. Selene is the moon. And I'm not going to read them all to you, but you can see there's drastic difference. Like, there is a big difference between Saturn and Selene. There's a big difference between the Sun and Venus, right? So, like, in what they represent in astrology. So these two systems, there's reasons why they chose these planets and these letters. But what that does is that means that you kind of have multiple planes of existence sitting on each other, and they're overlapping here. They're overlapping. Now, doing my research, when I came across, Bet being associated to Selene, which should have been Tav, I was like, where did that come from? And I dug around and I found a tradition started by a man named Saadia Gaon. Now, Saadia Gaon, who I didn't even know existed, and again, I have his name spelled differently twice. My apologies. It's one of those. He was born in the Middle East, as I've noted here, and he was a prominent Jewish philosopher blending Islamic and Greek sources of his time, and he basically created a Jewish tradition that was founded to have like a Babylonian feel. And this happened in the 10th century. As you can see, he was born in 892 and died in 942. I never heard of that man before until now. So, as you can see, rabbit holes, my friends, take you into interesting places, and you will learn things that you never knew existed. And had I not seen that chart showing me different values, I never would have guessed that that was a thing, or that this person was a thing. But he was an important figure, over 1,000 years ago, and he created that tradition. Now, why the text I'm reading, the Kabbalistic text, is choosing to use that, it doesn't reference him by name. It just says, bro, Bet is Selene, Gimel is Mars, Dalet is the Sun, etc., etc. It doesn't say because it comes from this tradition. It just says, as an empirical fact, that's where this is. And that's the other kind of the rounded keystone part of why I'm doing this video. The text I'm referencing comes from a guy named Jean Dubois, who was a very, very well-respected esoteric teacher, alchemist, Kabbalist, and he left a lot of teachings. He thought that teaching should be free. He wasn't. He was like the anti-grifter, so you can get his teachings, but he is choosing, much like in his alchemy, he chooses to use a different and older tradition, right? So he didn't use what Golden Dawn used. He used an older tradition for alchemy. Here in the Kabbalistic Hebrew, he's using an older tradition as well, which up to now he hasn't cited. So maybe he cites it later. I don't know. So far he has not. But that's where my sources came from and what inspired me to make this discussion, because you're going to run into that. You're going to run into that a lot. And share that information when you find those discrepancies, because it's useful. It's useful for everyone to know, in my opinion. That is all I've got for today. I hope this was useful for everybody. I'm sure that I will find more, and I will post as I find them. I'll put a video. My alchemy work is going along pretty well. This is just as an aside, not related to any of this talk. I do have the Melissa herb. It's maculating or marcinating. I'm learning the term still. It's doing its thing in alcohol right now. I did post some pictures of me preparing it and whatnot. So I'm very excited about that. Alchemy's actually energized me in ways I can't describe. It is said that when you work in alchemy, that it does help make those changes inside you as well, which is one of its uses. So I'll post more about that as, in a couple weeks. I got to check on it, and we begin the next phase, which is the fun phase of actually separating the mercury and the sulfur, and then you'll have the salts left and burning them and recombining them. And that's where a lot of the magic comes into play, as it were. But until then, my friends, I hope that you have stayed safe and your studies are going well. If you have anything you wish to share, please feel free to, contact me, join our Discord. We've got a lot of good conversations going. If you'd like to see some live streams, maybe we could do that. If I can get enough people interested, we could have a cool conversation. But otherwise, we're heading into September. A lot of cool stuff going on. It'll finally not be triple digits here in the desert, so I'm excited about that because it's a really beautiful time to be here once fall comes. So anyhow, that's all I got, guys. Till next time, we'll see you.